So budget is on top of my mind right now.
But, and that's all needed, but the
Yes.
problem is, somehow, you and your cohorts on the council, not you alone and stuff, have
Yeah.
managed to plunge us into a 66 and counting $1 million deficit, and that's starting out. And that's just, anyway, mind-boggling and stuff. And I know cities and counties and states kind of do that all the time and stuff, but it shouldn't be, you know? Not all cities and not all counties run a deficit. Because, I mean, no matter how much we cut, and there's gonna have to be some cuts, and if it does, and if we don't cut it this year, you're gonna have to cut it next year,
Yeah.
and then you're gonna have to find a place to find those resources and stuff, because you still gotta pay people
Yeah.
for the stuff that they did.
Yeah.
Which brings me to we keep spending money that we don't have.
Yeah.
We,
our-
meaning y'all,
Yeah.
not me.
Yep. Our
Because if I ran my affairs, business,
your house.
the way you do,
Yeah.
you folks did, I'd either be in jail or bankrupted 100 times. But for some reason, if you're in government, you can kind of like, 60 million in the hole. No, we'll just keep going until we get to 200 or 300 or a billion.
Yeah.
$1 billion in the hole like some cities,
Yeah.
and then we bankrupt. But
Yeah.
so the budget is,
That
we're
is-
trying to,
Yeah, so the new city manager, hopefully you'll get a chance to meet her at our community conversation that's happening next month. Keisha Smith, I really like her. She and her team is bringing budget items to council next month. And every department is going to talk about their budget and what they're going to put on the table. And then in April and May, the city council will have to have a conversation about it. What are the cuts that we're going to make? And it's going to be based on priorities.
and
So-
they're kind of asking around the city,
Yeah.
the city to come up with a way to slash like 15% or something like that from their budgets.
Yeah, so the ask is to ask every department to cut 15%. And while that sounds, like makes like 15% across all departments, it's just that I worry for parks because, like the Pinnell Community Center, because the thing is the YPC's department, youth, community enrichment and parks, their budget is much smaller than police, right? And so when you cut 15% of parks and their budget is smaller, they're gonna fill it.
You think they're going to be cutting 15% from the police and the fire department? You think that's going to happen?
I don't know. I mean, we
Really?
got to count the votes. We got to look around my colleagues to see
Uh-huh.
if
Okay.
So we'll see, right? I mean, if that's the task, then the mayor and council better be willing to do it, right?
Yeah. Which one of y'all is going to recommend cutting 15% from fire or police?
Well, you already know my position. Yeah, and so I think that's a conversation that has to be had on the council. We did a workshop at the end of last year, and the three priority that mayor and council had agreement on was one, public safety, right? And they see public safety can be defined very differently among all my colleagues, right?
Some people think public safety is giving the police
That's
everything
right.
they want, as
Yeah.
much money infinitum,
Yeah.
and every solution looks like it's attached to the police, which
Yeah.
is not how it should be. But
MKU and I are in alignment on this, right? Like what I was just telling our office hours before Ms. Stephen, Angelica and them, they asked about the budget too. My position is like, look, we can give the whole entire budget to PD and community will still not feel safe, right? Like safety means like making sure our families have access to opportunities, that our roads, our trails, our parks, that, making sure that we create the social conditions for public safety, right?
did you say roads?
Yeah, roads, I did say
Did you
roads.
say roads?
Yeah, it's roads, all of that, right?
So, okay, all right, you ever
Yes.
drive a bike or ride down
Yeah.
Meadowview Road?
Well, my husband takes bike, he drives it, he
On
rides his
Meadowview
bike.
Road?
Yeah,
Well,
there's a lot of improvement that's needed.
all right, I'm
yeah.
pretty sure you've seen a whole bunch of videos that I've taken of our wonderful streets in Meadowview, and
Yeah.
they've been like that for generations, longer than you've been alive.
Yeah, deferred
Longer than
maintenance.
you've
We
been
have
alive.
a long list of deferred maintenance that we need to address, absolutely, yeah. So, that is the conversation that's gonna happen. I think the next 2-3 months, MK, that is where the conversation, is happening on the dais. And so I always say to community, like, this is where you know, it's really important that people speak up, send email, and let them know what your priorities are as a resident, right? And I will vocalize that. The other piece is, actually today I talked to the city.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because if we keep going on in the same vein that we're going, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because the solution seems to be, well, we just take this $1 million deficit and we just push it down to the next year, and then it's 200 million. I mean, because that seems to be the approach, rather than taking those hard steps.
Like making those
where
hard
we've got to
decisions.
make those hard decisions and make those cuts
Yeah.
to stop that. And at the same time, since we're talking about budgets and cuts and stuff, so last year, you guys, now, we knew we were in a deficit, but the city council says like, yeah, you know what, we need to give ourselves a nice little raise. That is a horrible, that's just horrible optics.
I know,
I'm gonna take a raise
I didn't take
at
the
the same
raise.
time. And I'm glad you didn't, and I appreciate that. Now, how does that work? So you don't take it, they just don't pay you, or you give
They
it
just
back?
don't, yeah, they don't pay me, and I can say direct that to, like, you know, District 8.
Okay.
making sure, yeah.
And I think you should go further than that, because it's according to the charter.
Yeah,
And they act as if, well, it's in the charter and we have to do this.
Yeah.
Well, you have the ability to change the charter.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
that's an action that you could take moving forward.
Yeah,
But if we don't stop it here, if we don't say like, look, we don't need to do this, as long as we're in a budget deficit, as long as it takes, there's no pay raises for any of the city council staff.
Yeah.
And I would like you and your staff to propose that and say, this is what we need to do. What is wrong with you folks and stuff? I mean, that just looks absolutely horrible.